Hi, this is Mike Carmody. I'm the IFM instructor at Coaching Actuaries and also teach several of the VEE courses. But I wanted to give you just a bit of background how I got into the actuarial profession and some different areas I've worked in along the way. So I started in the actuarial profession way back in 1991, so about 30 years ago, and I worked at an insurance company in Louisville, Kentucky. That gave me the opportunity to work in what I would consider a traditional actuarial role. So I got to work in corporate finance and asset liability management and pricing and valuation. That really gave me a good feel for what actuaries did and also what actuaries did in relation to the overall insurance company. So I felt I had a good understanding of how insurance companies work and the role that actuaries play in that. So I did that for about 6 years and then decided I wanted to take a different path. I just really didn't like the corporate path that I was on. So I started my own independent actuarial consulting firm. So in that, I started out teaching some actuarial seminars on the fellowship track. So I enjoyed teaching, so that gave me the time and opportunity to do that. And then I also did many consulting projects that were really pretty closely tied to actuarial work. So that was where I started on my own. So I was still pretty closely tied to just pure actuarial work. But then along the way, I started drifting off a little bit, taking on projects that were not necessarily related to actuarial science. And the further along I got, the more the projects differed from what I would consider pure actuarial work. But what I found along the way is that my skills that I picked up as an actuary were very beneficial in how I could approach these different projects. Currently right now I have a couple projects going on. One actually relates to coaching actuaries because we are doing some online education for the CFA exams. So those exams are investment related, but they very much overlap with some of the actuarial exams. So the content is very similar. Of course, the audience is different and the style of testing is a little bit different, but we're able to utilize what we've learned in actuarial education and apply that to the education for the CFA exam. So that's where we're running SALT Solutions. So that is a good exam prep program for the CFA exams. And then another project that I'm currently working on is actually selling and distributing a concrete mixer. Now I realize that has nothing to do with actuarial work, but what I found in designing this concrete mixer, learning how to manufacture it, learning how to sell it, incidentally we call it the mud mixer, that's been very valuable to bring over some of my actuarial skills into that process. Because in any business, you're still trying to analyze the business, you're trying to analyze the operations of the business, the finances of the business, and all of that is what you learned along the way as an actuary. So even though I am certainly not an expert in concrete or anything even related to concrete, I can understand the business. I can even understand some of the engineering behind making this machine because I understand math. So all of that has been very useful along the way, just trying to run those different businesses. Also, I found that when I run different businesses, it actually helps me in some of my actuarial endeavors. You get a little bit broader perspective and get to learn some things that other businesses use that aren't necessarily used in the actuarial world, but you can apply some of that knowledge. So I've met some very interesting people along the way, from engineers to attorneys to marketing people to investment professionals. And I've learned a tremendous amount from each of those individuals that I felt if I had stayed just in the actuarial profession, I don't think I would have learned. So being able to apply that to some of my actuarial jobs has, I think, been beneficial. For some of you, you may be interested in pursuing stuff outside of the actuarial profession, and I would strongly encourage you to do that, to follow your passions, follow your dreams, what you have. But don't think that you've wasted any time in acquiring your actuarial skills. You're going to find those extremely useful. As I mentioned, a lot of the analytical skills you've developed along the way are going to be very helpful in your new endeavor. Also, just the process of studying for the exams. You've learned to digest some complicated information in a pretty quick fashion, and that's very useful as you engage in different businesses. So you can do that. So certainly feel free to venture out, but don't leave your actuarial roots too far behind because you'll find those very beneficial in whatever endeavor you decide to take on. Anytime you approach a new business, there's going to be risk. And you need to analyze that risk up front to make sure that you're comfortable with that risk. Before I take on any new business venture, I look at a worst case scenario. So I want to see how much could I lose if things go as bad as they could go. So as long as I'm comfortable with losing that much money, even though I don't want to lose that much money, but if I did lose that much, I'd be okay, then I can go through and move on to the next step in that business. Then I want to look at the possibilities that there's some upside potential, there's some downside potential. What are the specific drivers that are going to make this business successful or not successful? All of this closely relates to what you do in actuarial modeling. So that's another example of where I'm utilizing the actuarial skills that I have to analyze a different business venture that I'm in. Because sometimes business people, when they start out, are really too optimistic. They simply look at what is the upside potential that they have, and as long as that looks good, then they want to move forward. But as an actuary, we've been trained to look at risk first and then look at the upside potential. So I think that's been very beneficial along the way for me, that I can look at the risk objectively, not be pessimistic, but at least look at it in a way that's objective to say, okay, these are some bad things that could happen. If they happen, am I going to be okay with that? And really, what is the probability of a bad thing happening versus a good thing happening? So those are the different ways that I look at businesses and risk before I would want to take on a venture.